$8 for a triple shot caramel latte with a pinch of cinnamon? Shut up and take my money. Okay, so while I wait for the coffee, I'll quickly add it to my budget tracker. First, I'll open up my transactions form through this shortcut. That coffee was an expense. Now I'll select today's date, type coffee, $8, and lastly I select the category. Submit. That's how seamless the process of entering transactions for your budget can be. Now let's check out the results. Every transaction is automatically added to a monthly tab where we can select a month to see the breakdown of our income, expenses, and savings. There's a category analysis where we can see the results per category on a yearly summary. Want to see how you did last year? Simply change the year and the tracker shows the results based on your choice. The dashboard shows us beautiful insights with tables and charts that automatically adapt to the data of our choice. It's the perfect tool to monitor earning and spending behaviors as it translates raw data into a story. Not a bedtime story though. There's a year-on-year analysis section that compares budgets from the years of choice to understand how our performance and habits evolve. This one here is a totals table with the summarized data since we started tracking our budget. I added several hundred hypothetical transactions to show how this budget tracker transforms lines of data into versatile insights. You can see how all the transactions are safely stored in these two tabs and serve as a database for the rest of the tracker. Last but not least, there's a tab where we enter important information at the beginning. Initial balances, categories, planned budget, and a tool to customize our yearly breakdown. And that is it. We now have an epic budget tracker that requires minimal input. It takes seconds to enter transactions, and the insights we get from this data are extremely valuable. There's no need to make copies of spreadsheets every month or year, as everything is combined in this second generation budget tracker. If you would like to access this ready-to-use tracker in light, dark, and cyberpunk theme, make sure to visit my Patreon, which is linked in the description of this video. Now, let's first learn how to add this tracker to your account if you download it from the Planet Finance Patreon. When you first gain access to the tracker, you will see a folder and several files. Make sure to read the instructions first. So what you have to do is right-click the Google Sheets tracker and make a copy. Once a copy is made, you can go to your drive and the tracker will be there together with a copy of your transactions form. They are now in your private account, so you can open the transactions form linked to your tracker. The first time you open the form, there will be a message saying missing file upload folders. All you need to do is click restore, and Google will create a folder in your drive to store files you might upload when submitting a transaction. You are now ready to go, so you can get your private link by clicking send, and you can start entering data from your computer by clicking the preview symbol. If you want to add a shortcut to your phone, simply open the link from your phone's browser. In this case, I'm using Google Chrome, so I just press the three dots in the top corner and then click Add to Home Screen. Finally, you can change the name of your tracker and transactions forms to whatever you want and you're good to go. Now, let's learn how to build this budget tracker from the beginning. The first thing that we're going to do is go to Google and search Google Forms. Go to Google Forms, and we're going to start a new one. The first section is going to be the type, so we're going to see whether it's an expense or an income, and we want a drop down. I like to have expense on top because it's what usually happens the most, and then income. We're going to make it required, and we're going to select go to section based on answer. So I'm going to add the first section, and we're going to make this one the expenses section. So then when we hit expense, we want it to go to expense transaction. Okay, so here we are on the expense transaction. We're going to add a question, and the first question is going to be the date. So Google Forms automatically changes it to date, and we're going to make it required. We're going to add a second question. This is going to be the item description. Make it required as well. Next is the amount. And we're going to add a response validation because we always want there to be a number. So number is number. Make it required as well. And we're going to add the fourth question, which is the category. It's going to change to a drop down. We're going to make it required as well. And here's where we're going to add the categories that we want. Okay, so we're done with the categories. And finally, I'm going to add one more. a file upload. I'm going to click continue. And I'm going to say you can add several files, so 10 files. This one we're going to make it optional because maybe you don't always want to add receipts. And then what we're going to do is add a third section, the income section. And we'll do the same that we did with the expenses. So the first one is the date. Second one is the item description. The third one is going to be the amount. We're going to add a response validation, make it is number. Then we're going to enter the categories. And finally, the file upload. And we are good to go. The last thing to do is go back to the top, and for income, continue to section 3, the income transaction. So then whenever you enter an expense, it's going to take you to this one, to the expense transaction. And whenever you click income, it's going to take you to the income transaction. And one more thing that we need to do is scroll down to this one, to the expense transaction. And when it says after section 2, we're going to change it to submit form. So now if we look at it by pressing the preview symbol, we can see how we first choose whether an expense or income. So we go to expense, we have the date, the item description, the amount, the categories, the receipt, and then we submit straight away. We're not going to enter anything yet. So we're going to go to settings and select allow response editing, just in case you make a mistake. And then we're going to go to responses. Select these 3 dots and click select response destination. So what we're going to do is create a new spreadsheet. Create. So now this form is linked to a spreadsheet. You'll be able to see it on your list of Google spreadsheets. So once you click it, you can see that there's a tab called form responses. So now what we're going to do is enter a few responses so that we see how this fills up. We can see how this income transaction has been recorded. It automatically goes to your spreadsheet and it populates in the specific columns. So here we see that we got $1,250 in salary, and the category of salary on the 29th of October of 2021. The type is income, and there's a timestamp for it when we added the transaction. I just added a few transactions for October and November. I noticed that I actually inputted September for this expense, so I can simply change this to October. We can edit it here as well. However, I like to protect this sheet, or at least get a warning when I change something. So show warning, done. All I'm going to do now is just quickly change this to transactions. Okay. So I had it protected, and I'm going to add one more, and this one I'm going to call it data. Before I start with the data tab, I'm just going to format the transactions tab. So all I did was add some color to the columns just to understand which are the expense transactions and which are the income transactions. To add color, we need to do it with conditional formatting, because every time a new transaction is added, what Google does is inserts a new row with the information. Whenever a new row is added, then it won't be formatted that way because it's a complete new row. So what we're going to do is do it with conditional formatting. So all I did was go to format, conditional formatting, and I wrote this custom formula. You just have to do the same with expenses. So I select the range for expenses and I write the same formula, make it red, and then the same with the income. This is the only formatting that we're going to do for transactions. What I'm going to do now is start working on the data tab. What we're trying to do here is essentially make a copy of all the transactions that we have into data. We're going to do it by using a query function. But if you ever want to edit something, remember that you should always do it from the transactions tab. So here we're just going to link the titles to transactions. We're going to leave row 2 empty at the moment and continue on row 3. Here we're writing a query formula where we look at the data from transactions and we select everything where column B is not null. The reason why we left row 2 empty is because we're going to write the starting balance here. And we're going to add a dash to B2 so that we get similar conditional formatting later. And here in column M, we're going to write the running balance. Here is where we're going to enter our initial balance. So at the moment, I'm just going to do a hypothetical $10,000. And in these columns, we're going to enter many formulas that are going to be looking at the original data. So as you can see, this formula is looking at both date items that we have in the original transactions. So currently it's looking at the income date, which is the 29th of October. And we can see that it grabs the month and then the year. We're going to enter the month where we start. In this case, it's going to be October 21 as well. And we're going to make it a text format. This column, we specifically use it to look at the starting balance of every month. For the total expense per category, all we're doing is looking at the month that we have, looking at the category, and adding the amount that we have for each category on that specific month. We first look at the total that they've got, and then we calculate the average expense. So in this case, we're looking at that total expense that we had for that specific month, and then we summarize it by category just to find the average. By the way, instead of entering a formula and then dragging down all the way to the bottom, what I like to do is simply enter the formula in the first cell, copy it, then go down to the last row that you want, then press Control Shift or Command Shift, and then arrow to the top. So it's going to take us to the cell that we copied, and then all you're going to do is press Control or Command Enter. So that drags down the formula for us, and we did it all with the keyboard. Finally, the last bit that I missed was the running balance. The first one in row 2 is a manual input. You just enter the balance that you have in your accounts when you first started. And then for the second one, we enter this formula where we simply look at the previous balance that we had, we add any income, and then we subtract any expense. There we go. So that is pretty much it for the data tab. What I'm going to do now is also format it similar to the transactions tab, with conditional formatting so that my rows have specific colors whenever there's data in them. Okay, and there it is. I did the exact same thing that I did for the transactions tab. So format, conditional formatting. So as you can see, I used the same custom formula, equals $B2, open angle brackets, close angle brackets, quotations, quotations. The only one that changed was in column N. As you can see, the custom formula is B3 because I want this one to be yellow because we're entering data manually in this specific cell. I initially said that we were entering data manually for the running balance. However, this one's going to be linked to the next tab that we're going to work on. So we're going to open up a new one. We're going to call it Enter Info. So I've populated the data for this already, just to save some time. Essentially, what we have to do is enter different steps of what you have to do to set up the budget. So the first step is to enter balances information. So we got the starting balance, and here's where we actually enter the manual amount, so $10,000. So what we're going to do is go to data, and we're going to link it to enter info 10,000. And we're going to format it with a $sign. For step 2, we're going to enter the same categories that we entered in the form, and we're just going to enter the planned budget that we want. Same with the income budget. And then finally, for step 4, we're going to enter the year that you want. At the moment, they are in date formats. So what we're going to do is select all of them, and we're going to change it to plain text. The reason why we're changing it to plain text is because in the drop-down buttons that we're going to have in the dashboards and the analysis tabs, we want the drop-down to just show 1 month. Because we're working with specific dates, we don't want the drop-down to show 30th of October, 1st of November, 2nd of November. We just want it to show October and November. That's why we're changing it to plain text, so that we just see the month that we want and not every specific date connected to that one. And if you're going to use this alternative financial year, just make sure to paste it in columns K and L, because we're going to utilize these 2 columns for more tabs. Okay, so I formatted the Enter Info tab. Feel free to pause the video and copy everything according to how you entered data. Obviously, a few of the categories might change, as well as the budget, depending on the inputs that you have. But overall, just make sure to enter the data exactly where I'm entering it, because a lot of the formulas are going to be linked to this tab here. So we're going to add one more tab, and we're going to call this one the monthly analysis. Okay, so the first piece of information that we're going to need is the month. So we're going to get a drop down for all the months that we currently have. To do that, we go to data, data validation, and we're going to enter the following range. We're going to go to data and we're going to select from N3 and drag down. We're going to remove the numbers, so it's going to get the whole range. So now we get October and November. You can see there's an error, so all we're going to do is change it to plain text, and that should fix it up. What I did here was enter a formula with quotations, and I link it to cell B4, so whenever I change the month, this is going to change the title as well. We're going to first work on the income table. This is a combination of array formula with unique and query. At the moment it's giving us an error because it's grabbing information from this range. What I'm going to work on now is this section here, and all we're going to do is grab the transactions that are connected to this specific month, and then we continue with the rest of the formulas. So we're going to scroll down to line 43 and enter the transactions section. So this formula is looking at the data from A1 to O. So here from A1 all the way to O, we're getting that data, but we're getting it only for the month that we choose. That's why we entered B4. As you can see, this is the one for November. If I change it to October, then the data at the bottom changes. So it's like an advanced VLOOKUP. So as you can see, the formula that we previously entered now works. So for November, this formula is grabbing the information that we currently have. So at the moment, we've got salary and interest for income. Now that we have the category, we can easily work on the rest of the formulas just to VLOOK up the numbers that we want. All these formulas are going to be available in the description of this video. All you need to do is simply copy those formulas and paste them in the required cells. Now we're going to work on the total section. Okay, so that is the income table. Now we're going to work on the expenses table. In this case, we're going to use a slightly different formula to get the categories. This one's a bit more simple. We're using unique with filter. It's currently looking at all the unique values that we have in the expenses, and then it's just filtering out all the blank spaces. So as you can see, it's versatile. When we change the month, the values change. Okay, so now we have the income table and the expenses table. There are a few values here and I'm going to quickly explain them. So the actual value is how much we've earned or how much we've spent. The planned amount is the budget. This one you get the information from enter info. The third column is the difference between the planned and the actual, just to see your performance during the month. The average is looking at the average income or average expense of this specific category, and it's doing a VLOOKUP from data with the average income and average expense category columns that we previously calculated. The percentage is looking at how much the actual amount is from the total amount that we earned. And same thing with the expenses. It's looking at the actual expense versus the total expense, just to see what's the percentage of what you're spending. So in this case, 78% of our expenses have been for rent. Finally, the last column, the one for income, is the amount of income that you saved versus the expenses. Usually salary is the main cell that we look at for the percentage saved, but you can leave it for the rest of the categories if you want. For the expenses part, we look at what is the percentage of this expense versus the income. This one looks incorrect, so I'm going to change this formula. The total one is comparing the totals, so it's not really a sum. And now the last table that we're going to work on here is the savings. Before I start populating these, I first need to complete the balances section. So here at the top, we're going to enter the starting and the ending balance for the specific month. In this formula, we're combining array constraint with filter. So all we're doing is looking up this specific month in our data and selecting the first matching row with this data for the balance. So October, the starting balance is going to be 10,000. November, it's going to be 11,285. So as you can see, there's 11,285 and October should be $10,000. For the ending balance, all we do is enter the starting balance, we add the income, and then we subtract the total expenses. This is just part of the optional information that we enter here, just if you want to compare your current balance versus the starting and ending balance. So all we do is connect it to enter info. Okay, so now that we have this information, we're going to continue working on the savings, and we're going to make it a percentage. I think as a general rule, it's always good to keep it above 20%. The higher, the better. There are 2 items left in this tab. First, we're going to enter a progress chart for the income, expenses, and savings. And lastly, we're going to work on a few charts just to make it digestible. Then in this cell, we're going to work on a few spark lines. Okay, we're going to copy this. We're going to paste it here. Lastly, we're going to scroll down and work on the savings. So again, we're going to copy that, paste it here. And that is it for all the linking and formulas. I'm going to quickly format this with colors and borders, and then once I'm back, we can finish up the charts. Alright, so I'm back. I simply added some green, red, and yellow colors to differentiate income, expenses, and savings. The only conditional formatting that I added was in the difference. So if it's less than 0, I just make it green for income. And if it's less than 0 in expenses, I make it red. Same for this one. If it's greater than 0, I make it green. And if it's less than 0, I make it red. The last conditional formatting that I added was for the transactions. This one's similar to the conditional formatting that we applied for transactions and data. So if we look at the conditional formatting rules, we created a custom formula that says if cell C45 is not empty, we're gonna format it in this style. Let's start with the first chart. So we're gonna click Insert, Chart, and the one that we want is Column Chart. So for the data range, the first piece of information that we want is the actual income. The next one is the actual expenses. And the third one is the savings, the amount that we saved this month. So first I'm going to change the colors. I'm going to add a title. And we're going to add a horizontal axis title. And we're going to remove the legend. There it is. Now we're going to work on the income chart. For the data range, the first one that we're going to enter is the category, followed by the actual. Okay, and the last chart that we're going to work on is the expenses chart. And then for the data range, again, first one that we pick is the category, and the second one is the actual column. So the monthly analysis tab is ready. As you can see, everything is linked, versatile, everything changes according to the data. This one's so much better than the first version because previously, in the first version that I created, we had a specific tab for each month. Now we simply have a drop down with each month and all the data changes to whatever we click. Okay, so we're going to add the next tab and we're going to call it the category analysis. The first thing that we're going to enter is the year. And again, it's going to be a drop down. So we're going to go to data, data validation, and the list of range is going to be from enter info. And we're going to select all these years. And as you can see, we get all the years that we currently entered in the yearly breakdown. Okay, so first we're going to work on the income. I'm linking all of these to cell C3. So whenever I change the year changes for them as well. I'm going to link the categories directly from the enter info tab. And now we're going to enter a really cool formula. So it's transpose with query. What we're doing is selecting the information that we have from enter info. We're going to select all the values from column K, where column L contains the year. So we get the list of all the months that are linked to this year. So if we go to enter info, you can see how we entered all the months and the specific year. So again, this is just like in the monthly analysis, it's an advanced VLOOKUP where we get the list of months based on the year that we choose. So if we change it to 2022, the months change to 2022. And now that we have this set up, all we have to do is enter this single formula. It's a SUMIFS formula. So what we're going to do is add up the numbers from data J2 to J. So these here, they are the amounts. And we're going to select it with 2 filters. The first one has to do with the category, and the second one has to do with the month. Drag all the way to December, and then drag it down. So as you can see, the table has been populated for October and November. Beautiful formula, and it's fully versatile. So if I change the year, everything changes. Really cool. Okay, so now that we have the table populated, I'm just going to work on the totals and the average so that we can get a whole picture for the year of our choice. And this one, we're adding up all the months from January to December, and we're going to simply drag it down. For the average, we use the average if formula, so it's only taking the average of the cells that are not 0. So again, we drag it down to the total. It's currently linked to an empty cell, but as we enter the expenses breakdown, it'll look at the total expenses. And that is it for the income breakdown. Again, I'm going to format it later. I'm just going to continue building the skeleton of the sheet. So now we're going to work on the expenses breakdown. Here we link it again to the enter info. And we simply do what we did with the income breakdown, but in this case, the columns change. So now instead of adding column J, we're going to add column E. We have the formula ready. Simply drag to the right and then drag to the bottom. We've got the category analysis for income categories and expenses categories. Finally, we're going to do the exact same thing, but now with the savings. Okay, so that's the category analysis done. Now I'll just quickly format it by adding colors and a few borders. Okay, so there it is. As you can see, when we change the year, all the values change. And this section is complete. Now the last tab is the dashboard. This query formula is very similar to the one that we used in category analysis, but we're not transposing the months this time. And now all we do is add the sum of formulas to get the income, the expenses, and the net savings from the specific month that we choose. So this is a very simple table. It's just summarizing all the totals per month. And as you can see, it changes according to the data that we choose on the specific year. Now we're going to quickly work on a table that looks at the current month snapshot. This formula gives us the current date and it changes it to month and year. So I'm currently recording this in November. And we're going to populate the table by simply doing a sum if with the data using the current month that we have. We're going to use some sparklines to show the progress. And finally, the remaining budget. Okay, so now that we have these two tables completed, we're going to scroll down and create a space for the charts. We're going to leave some space and scroll down to complete the year-on-year analysis. So we just copy this cell and paste it in cell B37 and D37. The cell already has the data validation, so we get the list of the years. We're going to leave some space for the charts and work on a few tables. So again, we're going to use the query function to get the year that we want. In this case, we connect it to this dropdown from B37. And again, we use the sum if function to look up the income and the expenses from the data based on the month that we currently choose. We're creating a month-only table because we want to see the months in the graphs, but we don't want to see the years because the years are going to constantly change and we only want to see the months in the graphs. Okay, and here we go. This is the last table of this tutorial. It's been a long one, but I think it's worth it. This query function selects all the months that we currently have in enter info. I am connecting it to this cell, so I'm going to enter all in this cell. That way, if you ever want a few years to be excluded from that list, you simply remove the word all and it won't be there. So currently January 2024 is not there, but if we enter the word all, then it appears here. And that's it. No more formulas, no more tables. The skeleton for the dashboard is ready to go. So as usual, I'm gonna format it first, and then once we have the format with conditional formatting and borders and colors, I'm gonna finalize the tutorial by entering all the charts. Okay, the formatting is complete. I added a few borders and colors. I added conditional formatting to the net savings. If the values are ever less than 0, then they just show up with a red background. Okay, so let's start with these charts. So we're gonna go to Insert, Chart, and we're gonna choose a combo chart. So the data range is very simple. The first column that we want is the months. Second one, total income. Third one, total expenses. And the fourth one, the ending balance. Click OK. And if we go to the x-axis, we want months to be in the x-axis. And for the series, first we want the total income, then we want the total expenses, and finally the ending balance. Now we're going to work on a chart that shows us the current monthly summary. So we're going to choose a column chart, and the data range is going to be the actual income, the actual expenses, and the savings. And we want this one to be a line chart. The data range that we're going to choose are the months and the net savings. So we can see a line chart of the movement of savings per month. In this space, we're going to enter a few graphs that are using the category data from the category analysis tab. So for the data range, we're going to go to category analysis, and we're going to select the categories and then the average income. Now we do the same for the expenses. And in this one, we're going to enter a donut chart. For the data range, we're going to go to category analysis and select the categories with the totals. Okay, so we're missing the last three graphs. The first one's going to be a column chart. So the first data range is going to be the months. The second one is the income for the left graph. And the third one is the income for the graph on the right. And there you go, we're comparing the income between 2020 and 2021. Now we just enter the same chart, but in this one we're going to select the expenses. And the last chart is going to be a combo chart. We're going to select the months, the income, the expenses, and finally the ending balance. And there it is. We are finally done with this budget tracker. Let's quickly test it to see if everything works. So I'm gonna submit an expense using today's date. Oh, we don't really have a category for charity, so I'm gonna click other. And if we go to our budget tracker, we can see how the Planet Finance donation of $5 has been added successfully to the transactions. We click data and it's there as well with all the other calculations. We go to the monthly analysis, we change the month to November and we can see that the $5 are there. We go to the category analysis and we can see that $5 have been recorded under the other category in the month of November, and the dashboard is showing the updated numbers, so we can see the other $5 are there, it's been added to the charts, and the numbers have been updated. If you have all data from another budget that you want to add to this budget, first you have to place them in the correct columns. So for income, we place them in these columns, and for expense, we place them in these columns. And all we do is copy the data, go to transactions, it's the data, and then we select all the rows of what we pasted and we drag it to the top. So here I added transactions for August and September. If we go to data, it's still not there. So what we need to do is change this formula back to A2, and the data is updated. So now we've got August, September, October, and November. And you can change the month to August because we started in August. I really hope this second generation budget tracker helps you analyze your earning and spending behaviors. This is Planet Finance. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, happy learning.